Jai Guru, everyone.
Jai Guru, and welcome to our next episode of the podcast Awake the Life of Yogananda. We have reached minute number 77, and I'm here with the usual crowd. Hello, Priyank. Hello, Chris. How are you guys doing?
Bonjour.
Fantastic.
Buongiorno or
Ciao.
bonjour? What was that?
Ciao.
Okay.
Without the "or."
Oh, bonjour.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Because you learned French.
I've been in Italy now for 2 months, and I'm ashamed to say I can pretty much just say ciao and arrivederci, per favore. Get your manners right. Get your manners right.
As long as you know what all the food is called on the menu, you're fine.
Yeah, margarita, that's all you need to know, mate. Shout out to Margarita.
Margarita.
Yes,
oh,
yes,
yeah.
Number one fan. Hello, Margarita.
Hello.
Thank you for your continued comments. Inspired.
Yeah.
Yes. And inspiring.
Very much
well
so.
Received.
So minute 77 is very much like we have like dramatic music in the background, because if you remember where we left off at the Biltmore Hotel, and there's a large gathering, and Yogananda has made some comments that he will leave his body soon, and the day has come, and we kind of go into that scene now, and it is a bit dramatic. I think the most common witness account of the day is by Sri Daya Mata. That's the one we often heard, and I feel like the best way to get us into it is to read an excerpt from her book, Finding the Joy Within You. And let's start with that. Priyank, do you want to start reading?
Sure. There was a large audience, which included city, state, and government of India officials. I was sitting some distance from the speaker's table, but my mind and gaze never left the blessed Guru's face. Finally, the time came for him to speak. Gurudeva was the last to do so before Ambassador Sen was to address the gathering. As Guruji rose from his chair, my heart skipped a beat, and I thought, oh, this is the moment.
Wow. So she had a premonition. And yeah, I'm guessing, I wonder if Ambassador Sen was actually speaking afterwards or not. We don't know.
You mean whether he actually did speak? Yeah, that would be interesting. Yeah. I doubt he would have, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I guess she would have known that it was coming, because he did say to her that it was a matter of hours, right? It was a matter of time. So
well, that's why she said, "Oh, this is that moment."
Yeah, exactly. But less so a premonition than he simply told her.
Yeah. But she did say that she didn't want to accept it as truth, right? At the time she did. Chris, do you want to continue reading?
Absolutely, yeah. When he began speaking with such love for God, the whole audience was like one person. No one stirred. They were transfixed by the tremendous force of love that he was pouring from his heart upon all of them. Many lives were changed that night, including some who later entered the ashram as monastics, and many others who became members of the society because of that divine experience. His last words were of the India he loved so much, where Ganges, woods, Himalayan caves, and men dream God. I am hallowed, my body touched that sod. And he, as he uttered these words, he lifted his eyes to the Katashta center, and his body slumped to the floor. In an instant, our feet seemed not to touch the ground. 2 of us disciples were by his side. Wow.
Priyank?
Yeah, the recital of this section, Guruji obviously actually says it. He's speaking in this minute. And the recital of this section of the poem, he says it really in a rushed, dramatic kind of tone. And it works very well, because the scene also has like a boy running around in the Himalayas, Himalayan peaks. And that's the boy actor that we have spoken about in the past. But yeah, just hearing Guruji read his own poetry has a special feel, and one wonders how he would have recited it on that day, because here in this rendition it's very rushed, very rushed and quick and short reading, really. But yeah, I also found it interesting that he lifted his eyes to the Kutastha center. I think he said in the autobiography of a yogi, I think Lahiri Mahasaya may have done that before he entered his Mahasamadhi, when he turned thrice and then sat in the lotus posture and exited. And interestingly, our feet seemed not to touch the ground. Two of us disciples were by his side. Now, there's a couple of interpretations of that. It's a shame we don't have what it actually means, but maybe you guys can say. So our feet seemed not to touch the ground. Did that mean that they were rushing to Guruji to get to his side, or does it mean that as Guruji left, as he raised his eyes, they kind of had that feeling where they were floating, kind of feeling? Chris?
My interpretation is the latter, really. Whenever you have a significant moment in life, you almost have that out-of-body experience where you're maybe not quite as connected with the senses of the body as much. And time maybe travels in a different way as well. So the recollection of those moments might, in your memory, be quite different to other moments of normality that you might have. So my interpretation is that the latter, you kind of walk light-footed in very significant moments of your life.
I think so too. I think she was talking about him speaking with this love pouring from him, and the whole area might have been like a very might have had a very elevated vibration, and I feel like everyone was kind of drawn, I don't know, in higher states at this point, and maybe that's why they didn't feel the feet under the ground anymore.
What I liked about this interpretation, just to comment here, is the eyes went to the Kutastha center. That isn't actually that's left out in the documentary, right? I don't recall that being mentioned anywhere. And for us, as aspiring yogis, that's really significant. That really means something. But to the lay person, that probably wouldn't really mean so much. The Christians, when they pray, they look to God, He's in heaven, so they look up, but they still do that motion as well. They still look up to the Christ center, whether they know what they're doing or not. So I thought that's maybe missing an opportunity in the documentary to include that point in there, because it really does pull this together in this moment of his Mahasamadhi.
Although the documentary deliberately kind of left out a lot of like secular words, like Mahasamadhi. Did they say Mahasamadhi? They said he left, he collapsed to the floor, for example. And in this minute, I think Masvidal might have said Mahasamadhi, and he explains Mahasamadhi later, Masvidal does. But in the whole film, really, they try and use words that are like not so technical. So Kutastha is obviously a very technical word, isn't it? And they'd have to then explain what Kutastha means, because like effectively this film was for newcomers, or a lot of it was meant to attract new people to Guruji, and they wanted to keep it as simple as possible. And at work we have an acronym called KISS, KISS. Keep it simple, stupid.
Yeah, quite possibly.
Maybe.
Well, I wonder, if anybody knows more about the editing of this, if they actually had that in there and decided, let's keep it simple, stupid, or not.
It was Brother Chidananda that said, he collapsed to the floor.
Yeah.
In this minute,
Yeah, I think Priyank is right that they try to appeal to the broadest possible audience, and that's why they don't mention any fancy terms in the film. But yeah, it would be interesting to have that in there, like the looking at the spiritual eye is like a very basic mudra, right? That's part of every meditation, as they are taught by Yogananda. But they chose not to put that in there.
Debatable. What did the audience think? Better to have in or out? Should we hold a poll?
Yeah.
Vote. Place your votes.
Don't really have an opinion.
Yeah.
I'm gonna read the last bit of this. Thinking that he might have gone into samadhi, we softly chanted Om in his right ear. Over the years, he had told us, when he went into ecstasy, if after some time his consciousness did not return, we could bring him out of that state by chanting Om in his right ear. As I was chanting, a miraculous experience took place. I do not know how to describe it to you, but as I knelt over my blessed Guru, I could see that his soul was leaving the body. And then a tremendous force entered my being. I say tremendous because it was an overwhelming, blissful force of love, peace, and understanding. I remember thinking, what is this? My consciousness was lifted up in such a way that I could feel no sorrow. I could shed no tears. And it has been so from that day to this, because I know beyond any doubt that he's truly with me.
Really, really powerful, isn't it?
Yeah.
You know, when she recites, it's really nice, Mike, that you found this whole section that she said, because in the minute she only says, as I kneeled over his body, tremendous force entered this body, and with the message to my soul, this time you cannot call him back. So this is like Mike just read out basically the fuller description of that, which is, I think, really important for us devotees, because as we know, there's much more to it, as Mike just read out. And most importantly, I think this kind of answers our previous question about, our feet seem not to touch the ground, because she said, when she said tremendous, she really meant, tremendous. And when she recited that word in this minute, when she said like a tremendous force entered this body, you could feel it. Even, you could feel it from just the video, that how tremendous it was, and you kind of have a feeling of maybe just like a fraction of what it would have felt like, because she says it so beautifully and with such depth of feeling and emotion, which is she's probably the most unique, I think, out of all of our ministers, and specifically direct disciples, in being able to evoke that feeling of like putting us right at the feet of Master and the experiences she's having.
Just to add to that as well, she said in the documentary, this body, she said tremendous force entered this body, and you could tell the awareness that she had when she said it as well, which was really, I thought, was really humble. She's separating her ego from what's actually going on.
Could you mention that, Chris? Because I was actually going to mention that, but I like had a blank thought. I think I need to mention something, and you finished it. We finished it. We're in good synchronicity there. But I think it's not just humbleness as well, because I think when in the recent convocation, one of the talks was the healing one that one of the monks did. He said, like, never say, I am sick or I am unwell. Say this body is sick or this body is unwell. And Daya Mata is literally practicing it to the most beautiful degree when she says tremendous force entered this body. So it's, you're right. On the one hand, it shows her elevation, but she's doing it in such a humble way. But actually, that's such a profound truth that we need to learn from that line. And we can, obviously, this is probably the best example that we can have, my Guruji taking Mahasamadhi.
Yeah, meditate on that point. Yeah.
One other point that I find interesting here is that she says, because I know beyond any doubt he's truly with me. And that is important because I feel like a lot of people, they hesitate to follow a guru that is no longer in the body. And we had some examples that we talked about in other episodes. And the realness, the kind of feeling that he is not in his body, but he is with me even more than he was before. And that is important because that kind of, like, for us who come 2 generations later, for us it can be the same as it was for her. We can create this real relationship with our guru. He's not in the body, but he is there. And the more we kind of devote our lives to him, the more we will feel this. And I think that's also a reason why she mentioned this here, that because it must have been for a lot of the people who were following Yogananda at that time, she said a lot of the people who were present, they became monastics later or started following the path. But I'm guessing there must have also people who left because they thought, oh, he died and now he's gone. And it is how we think naturally, right? So to overcome this barrier. Priyank?
Yeah, it's a significant hindrance to our spiritual path, isn't it? Needing or feeling that we need a physical guru in that's living, and not only living, that we can actually go see and spend time with, and he can give us direct instruction, as if God doesn't do that in every single walk of our life and every single leaf that blows in our direction, telling us which way we need to go. If only we would look a bit deeper and think a bit more profoundly. But obviously that's quite hard, and that's why the emphasis is so much on developing intuition, because Guruji he does do so much that we are unaware of, but we have to become more and more aware of it so we can seek his guidance, and make it the core, like, supporter in the decisions that we have to make in our lives. But yeah, Mike, I totally agree. That line about because I knew beyond doubt that he is truly with me is a very poignant and powerful one. And she must have said this, it's the interview where this is recorded, it must have been quite late in her years. So she's kind of remembering this maybe 40 years on. And it's like, it feels like she's saying it and it was yesterday, doesn't it? And that must be exactly how she remember or holds that experience. It probably is one of the most significant moments for her, with not just in her life, but obviously we know she spent so much time, she was blessed to spend so much time physically with the Guru. So an interesting parallel that potentially her most significant moment was when Guruji had left the body. And she's, yeah.
Definitely true. I think that's definitely one of the defining moments of his, obviously of his life, of her life, and of the whole organization as well. I feel like that was one of the powerful things. And I feel like that's also why we commemorate it, right? That's why March 7th is like one of our, I would say, main SRF holidays, right?
Guruji's Mahasamadhi commemoration services. How many have we attended? I think, Mike, you're probably winning out of us three in the number that we've each attended.
Are you calling me old?
Experienced. But yeah, this this point about Guruji's promise to us and what he's left for us, I think we'll discuss a bit later in this episode. There's a bit more to discuss in this respect, particularly with what Daya Mata said, but we can probably move on.
Yeah. While we're at March 7th, we are an apolitical podcast, but we do appreciate that in 2017, India's Prime Minister Narendra Modi has paid a special tribute to Paramahansa Yogananda, and the government released a postage stamp celebrating 100 years of YSS in India. And the day they chose to celebrate it was March 7th, which is the Mahasamadhi Day, which I found beautiful. And the Prime Minister also came to YSS. I believe it was in Ranchi where he went, and unveiled the postage stamp, and also gave an inspiring speech about spirituality and the role of Yogananda, a child of India who spent most of his life outside of India, but is still very much revered in India.
Yeah. Speak for yourself when you say apolitical. My political allegiance is plain as day. No. This 100-year stamp, one of the devotees at the London Centre, she bought like 100 of them, and she gave it to each of us volunteers as a gift, which was pretty nice. And so I've still got mine. I used to keep it in my wallet. I laminated it and I used to keep it in my wallet. But now, as you know, I've got a mini little altar of the Gurus in my wallet. So that stamp is sitting in my drawer right now. But yeah, it's a really lovely tribute, isn't it, to Guruji?
Amazing. Yeah. I mean, I find that, India is such a massive country, 1.4 billion people, and then you are the head of the government of the country. I feel it's very meaningful, very moving.
Yeah, and it shows you how little, like, you can say what you will about how right-wing BJP and Narendra Modi is, but the fact that
I think our apoliticalness is going out the window now.
Well, that's why I did warn you. But the fact that, which is interesting because I'm very left-wing in my outlook, but with Modi for some reason. Anyway, let me finish what I was going to say. It's interesting because, in the last episode we talked about International Yoga Day, and
also his initiative.
Yeah, his initiative, and this is, yoga is a secular thing, is not particularly belonging to Hinduism, right? And nowadays yoga is practiced without any reference to religion whatsoever in gym studios around the world and homes around the world. So, and Modi, as we know, Modi kicked this off as a Hindu, but he's actually celebrating the fact that look at the difference this civilization has made to the world. And similarly, Yogananda, you'd struggle to put him in the bracket of a conventional Hindu teacher, right? Because he embraces so much of other religions, and his universal appeal would certainly offend a lot of conservative Hindus. But the liberal amongst us know how important his message was to the world and to religions and to humanity. And this stamp, that side of it, this is what that stamp celebrates. And if it was National Congress in power, which they have been in India for many decades, they wouldn't have commemorated this stamp, and they certainly wouldn't have done it, because they would think, oh no, we're a secular nation, we can't promote one ideology over another. But you're missing such a glorious impact. And the fact that Yogananda was, he would have been such a good union person for Christians and Hindus in India. They could have embraced this, right? But you just can't see them doing it. This podcast is getting a bit political right now, so perhaps we shouldn't enter this too much into this conversation.
Yeah. So muddy waters. But Yogananda was certainly not one to mince his words when it came to some very sharp topics. So it's healthy to express yourself, Frank, with no risk of persecution from the YouTube viewers.
Yeah, I hope I was had a bit of moderation in my.
Yeah, at the end of the day, isn't it Krishna who said, like, at the end you will know the good right action from the wrong action by the fruits, and I feel like like when I see this postage stamp, I'm going like, yay, that's I approve that. But I don't like, politics is always difficult, especially in these days where everybody is polarized, and so yeah, let's not get into that too much. Let's go to another thing about Guruji's Mahasamadhi, which I, who goes to Lake Shrine often, find very interesting. I have the privilege to sometimes volunteer at the Windmill Chapel, and at the Windmill Chapel there is a plaque, or it's like a little sign with a picture of Guruji and some of his disciples, and they say this picture was taken on March 6th, the day before his Mahasamadhi. And so they call it the Last Supper, similar to Jesus' Last Supper. And there's also a piano there in the Windmill Chapel, and apparently he had played at the time in that Windmill Chapel. That's the one. Yes.
Yes.
You got it.
So I've got, for our listeners, I'm holding like a two-tier. It's a picture of Guruji playing, and Guruji playing a I think it's a organ, actually, a two-tier organ, with feet things as well, whatever they're called. So it is quite a complex, they're quite a complex instrument. So yeah, it's this one I keep next to my harmonium to help me be inspired when I'm learning different chants, as Guruji would have done.
Yeah, it's a fantastic scene to imagine. I'm just gonna read an account of one of the monks there. He said, Master sat before the organ and played several of his chants and other Indian music. Our hearts were filled with rapture. A real devotee of God was singing to the Divine Mother, and we felt his love and devotion and the bliss flowing from his hallowed temple. His eyes were radiant with joy. And I feel like that kind of goes hand in hand with what Daya Mata said the day after. I feel like the last few days in his body, he was probably already preparing, and his state was very, very elevated, and his joy was radiating out to everybody. And everybody who got to see him in those last few days probably got a tremendous amount of blessings.
Yeah, and he was and he was apparently chanted "Light the lamp of thy love" for more than an hour. And that's the quote I've put on the picture. Yeah, I haven't on my picture of the harmonium. Yeah, I haven't yet learnt that chant. It just feels like one of those ones that are too hard for me.
It's one of the more difficult ones because you have to go up and down a lot.
Yeah. So my vocal range probably isn't good enough, and let alone my. It's interesting because when I learn these chants,
vocal range that has never stopped me from.
My wife has a strong opinion on this, especially because she has to bear my practicing. But I when I'm learning more complex chants, even simple ones, actually, like they'll go perfectly at home when practicing, and then I'll take the hour commute to the center and lead the service, and something will go wrong. Oh gosh, how am I getting this wrong now? I've been doing it for a week, and there must be some, ego thing in there. Guruji remind me, sing with a bit more humbleness in your.
I know that feeling. Yeah.
Yes.
That's great. Yeah. So chanting, a way to invoke devotion. And I feel like that's what Yogananda was always emphasizing as well, the Kriya Yoga plus devotion, the magical formula. And yeah, there was a lot of devotion in his last appearances. They show a picture. So basically the sequence is that the music gets a bit dramatic in the movie. They show his picture. And then you see a sequence of pictures. You see first water, then you see a person running like down a little alley, running through a door, right? And then you see him running across a field with like Himalayan mountains in the backdrop. Fantastic shot, like so beautiful. I don't know if I would know where this place is, I would want to go there right away. And he has like a staff in his hand, and he has long hair. So I'm kind of thinking of Guruji running there. And I was wondering what you guys made of that scene. And then they were reading those last few words that he was saying, were Ganges woods, Himalayan caves, and men dream God, I am hallowed. My body touched that sod. Was that him running through his life? Was that the kind of sequence that we're going for? Or
yeah, that's a good good interpretation, actually. That would make sense. For some reason, when I was watching that minute, and he was running through that little alleyway, I for some reason thought of Kashi, where Lahiri Mahasaya, you know, where he was, you know, where his home was, and where his Mahasamadhistan is. And you know, you know, you're allowed to go there, and there's statues of him. And one of the doors that he runs past, it looks exactly. I thought it was maybe have been Lahiri Mahasaya's house, but maybe not, because I think that's quite a for some reason that's quite a popular picture, isn't it? People like to have just a picture of that doorway, Lahiri Mahasaya's doorway.
Yeah.
It's quite popular on social media.
Yeah, absolutely. Chris?
My impression of this was similar to yours, both. It's this massive, expansive bit of land, isn't it, with the mountains with snow on top. He's running on sort of dry, arid kind of grassy land. So you get this contrast, you know, you see the big sky, the big mountains. So it's a really great shot, but then it ends with him running towards the sun. And that's the bit that I thought, oh, that's pretty cool, because they made it that way. So he's running downwards, but he's running head on into the sun. And I thought that was beautiful for me, going to the light. So like that analogy, that metaphor for me came across pretty strong. Whether or not that's something that they're trying to get across in this thing or not, I don't know.
Yeah.
Similar to the sorry, Mike. Similar to maybe not a good comparison, but the film Gladiator, in his last, when just before he leaves his body, he has that kind of spirit, that mystical experience, and then there's that really deep music, and then he kind of similarly kind of like elevates his consciousness into the light, and he sees his family and stuff. Like, similar sort of feeling.
Yeah,
obviously,
maybe that's where they got the inspiration from Gladiator. Why not?
One.
Are you not entertained?
Yeah, they kind of go for this because they keep the dramatic music going in the background, right? And then they close it out with showing the sun and then showing some plants or some palm trees before, so it fades out like that slowly. Find it's nicely done. One shot they sneak in between is like a burning god or something similar, where you see a body burning. Must be in India somewhere. And I thought we could talk about this a little bit. So what I saw is that there seem to be burning gods all over India, but the river Ganges is very, very famous for it. And I feel like a lot of people who don't live near the Ganges still want to be cremated by the Ganges in India. So the demand seems to be very high. And then Varanasi seems to be the center of the burning god industry, if you want to call it that. And then in Varanasi, there's like two very famous gods. One is called Manikarnika, and the other one, sorry for butchering the words, and the other one is called Harish Chandra. And they both seem to be burning up to like 80 to 100 bodies per day, which seems a lot. Like there's only 24 hours in the day, so I feel like there must be every 15 minutes that a body is going in. I'm guessing.
It's a streamlined parallel process.
They've had plenty of practice to get that right.
If you can do ceremonies in parallel, that's different. Then you can do more.
Yeah. Interestingly, only men tend to go to cremations. Don't
To witness.
Yeah, cremations. Only the men would go. The men as a household. I think I read somewhere that it's to do with women are more energetically, they're more susceptible to spirits and energy and stuff like that. So obviously in cremation grounds where someone has just left their body, the theory is that in India you get cremated pretty much on the same day. So if you pass away in a few hours, you'd have your cremation, and they would obviously then go to the river, such as the Ganges, or a remote part of the village. And yeah, so if that's the case, then really the theory is that the body, the soul hasn't actually, it clings to what it's familiar with. This is obviously a soul that isn't an elevated soul such as Yogananda's. So this is one that isn't enlightened, shall we say. It's kind of lingers with what's familiar. So obviously the body is the most familiar thing, and that is why we do the cremation like straight away, and we put white clothes on the body that's being cremated, and not like things that that person would have been attached to or known. So make it as quick and as a spiritually beneficial process as possible for not just the departed, but also loved ones that are there. Because you want to place the least emphasis on the body consciousness. The memory obviously it lives on, but there should be no emotions about the body that's being vacated.
I find this subject entirely fascinating, because it's one of the taboo subjects that we do not talk about, certainly in the UK, in Northern Ireland, where I was raised. Death, we don't talk about death. No, we all know death comes, and we experience death throughout our lives, but we don't talk about it. And you don't talk about preparing for death all that much, apart from those adverts that you see on TV that run during the day to prepare for paying for your funerals and things like this to help that. But we don't really talk about it, do we? And
so they won't like the chant, death will be at thy door and you may not have time anymore. Oh my saint, wake yet awake. That's not a chant for the Irish.
No, they might be offended. Who knows? But it's so fascinating, isn't it?
Maybe you could turn it into a sea shanty then.
Yeah. I'm not going to try anytime soon. So that's what you're trying. But I guess, do you think it's something related to the nature of the spirit in the physical form, like how yoga portrays it, and how entwined our spiritual being is with the body? Because it's so much more of an educated take on it in yoga than it is, in the common Western take. And something that I've read somewhere is that the big toes, should they be tied together? And that should stop like spirits from maybe entering the body or things like that. And it's fascinating to me that these are practices that are part of tradition in India. This is something that we once knew, and it's obviously lost and gone in the most part, but hopefully making it's being resurrected from the ashes, and it's something that we just do not talk about, won't entertain, but it's something that can really help the soul to go on. Yeah,
that's super interesting. I feel like we talked about this in earlier episodes about the role of dogma in the Dark Ages, where you have knowledge from the higher ages, and you just pass it on, even though it's not understood anymore in the Kali Yuga, and you just follow it anyways, keep the tradition alive. I think St. Augustine talked a lot about this, about Christianity, because he was basically in the Kali Yuga. So he was like, dogma, we don't understand a lot of it, but it's still great because it kind of keeps the tradition going, and there's a lot of hidden wisdom in it. And it must be the same with what you just mentioned, with tying the big toes together and things like that. I'm sure there's some metaphysical background to it that we don't understand right now.
Yeah, the metaphysical thing is that tying the big toes together then closes your legs, and then you kind of in yoga you and in energization actually, you sometimes do like the stomach undulations, like you kind of clasp that area, you close the area, and you're basically shutting the Muladhara and the lower chakras, and you're holding a bandha or a lock, as it were. And then with our stomach undulations, you're actually moving that lock up and down, right? You're moving your stomach. But in this case where you tie the big toes together, that's a kind of a permanent lock. So then you're trying to close off the body, as it were. And there's many other things, like you kind of face the body north, you wash the body, you scatter the ashes straight away after the cremation. So there's all sorts of things, but none of this actually applies to a guru who is taken Mahasamadhi, because to him there's no possibility of that him unconsciously entering that body, or all that, anything crazy such as that, because he's obviously in full control. This is all for people that are not aware when they pass, and which is obviously the majority of humanity. So yeah, and interestingly, and we know obviously Guruji was buried, and I was reading a biography about Lahiri Mahasaya by Swami Satyananda Giri, who was Yogananda's childhood friend, and he was saying that Lahiri Mahasaya, I think you'll know that his body was cremated, as with Hindu family rites, but in the book, in the biography, he actually he knew he was going to leave his body, and he, as Yogananda did, he told some people that he was going to leave his body, and said, my body should be you should put it in a crypt, in a vault, and you should bury it, and this is where I want you to do it, basically under his house, I think it was, and that would obviously then create a kind of a temple or a shrine, such as the one that we have for Sri Yukteswar and Paramahansa Yogananda. But because the family was so influential, they decided to not take that advice, and they cremated him.
Wow, shocking.
Interesting.
Yeah. So then we would have been interesting, because then we would have had three samadhistans in our guru lineage, one in US, one in North India, and one in East India, for each of our beloved gurus.
It would have been too much. God decided too much.
Yeah, two. I'll give you 2 out of 3. Humanity.
Still pretty good.
Yeah,
I would say.
Yeah, I can't wait to
Awesome.
one day visit Puri to go see Sri Yukteswar's ashram.
Same. I would actually like to go there. But let's see when it will happen. I would also like to see Guruji's body on display somewhere at a shrine. So it doesn't even have to be on display, but maybe have like a shrine built for him. That would be nice. Let's see if that will happen in our lifetimes. Nice. So let's move on to the last days of Guruji, and the one thing that a lot of disciples felt as he was making comments that he would leave the body, a lot of people were scared, and a lot of people felt like, what would they do without him? And I feel like this part will address this a little bit, like his kind of role or the promise that he will always be with us. Priyank, do you want to start reading?
Yeah, so this is from Dr. Lewis, I believe. And so this is his experience of those days, I suppose. Now I'll tell you one or two things about my own experience with him the last few days. Lately, he has been reminiscing about how we started way back in Boston 32 years ago. He said, "Remember Electric Avenue? That's where we used to live. All the good times we used to have." And I said, "Yes." And he said, "We've had a good life, haven't we?" I said, "That's right." I said, "Yes, we might have been hanging around a nightclub and things like that, but no, this is better. We can let go." Then he said quickly, without much emphasis, "We'll be parted for a little while, and then we'll be back. We'll be together again. But the delusion is so great that even when I wouldn't accept it, I knew my soul went just right back when he said it. Sure, the Lord keeps it covered up pretty well." with little hints, which in hindsight, he probably massive hints, aren't they? But at the time, he's, you know, kind of just, you think it's just a throwaway comment.
Yeah, Dr. Lewis is, of course, his very advanced disciple, and I think his first disciple in Boston that he had, and he lived with the Lewises there, I think at Electric Avenue, at that house. I had the privilege to go there. It's owned by a family. I don't think they're devotees, and I was told that I shouldn't knock on the door because it happens a lot to them that devotees go. I was told explicitly to not do that, so I didn't. But I was outside the house, and very, very nice area of Boston.
Yeah, very appropriate name, Electric Avenue.
Yeah, it's true.
What was going on there? So I can continue reading. So when he said, this is Dr. Lewis speaking, when he said we'd be separated for a little bit, but then together again, then he said, right at that time, I remember so distinctly, but remember, I'll be close to you when I'm out of this body, that I have been in the body. So remember, there is the key. So let us not be depressed. Let us not feel bad. God is running the show. We are his children, and his infinite light is within us. In that light is the master and all great saints. There is nothing to fear except if we do not stay in that light and consciousness. That's all.
Beautiful.
Priyank, you have a comment?
No, it's just very beautiful.
Yeah, and it does address a little bit that natural thing. I mean, those were all highly advanced yogis, so I feel like at some part of them knew that this was happening and that it would be okay, but they played their role as humans and grieved or were going to grieve. But he says it so beautifully. He says we'll be apart for a short while and then back together, and that's the promise that it goes for all of us, right? That we will be with Guruji at some point. I'll read the last bit. And so I feel better. A load has been lifted. I didn't know what the load was, with some physical trouble going with it. But the load was that coming events cast their shadow, and the soul knows it. And so be of good cheer. The master is not away from us. He is with us more and more.
So just to comment on this this passage that we're reading, it's taken from a website called, it's ocoy.org, and it's the original Christianity, original yoga.org. And then it's Yogananda's last days. So it's a transcript of a talk given by Dr. Lewis in 1952, March 10th. It's quite long, so we can link the article for people who want to actually jump in and read it. But it does talk about his own this personal experience that we've just read out. It does talk a little bit about what was going on in those last few days, and there's interesting information in there that he's sharing, saying that Yogananda's health, certainly he was in a lot of pain. He had taken on a lot of karma from many people, and he specifically said to Dr. Lewis that the condition was of the karma that he'd taken on affected his legs and his heart. So he said that he'd taken on so much karma that there were many times where he couldn't move in his last days, but he was quite insistent on taking on the karma. He was very conscious in doing that. Priyank?
Yeah, I think when he was struggling to use his legs and he needed to get upstairs at Mother Center, and Anandamoy, Brother Anandamoy relates this, that he was struggling, so they had to carry him. And as they were carrying him, he obviously looked at them and smiled, and he said, you carry my body, I'll carry your souls.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Powerful.
So yeah, there's some really great takes in there. So I'd encourage anybody to give it a read if they have time. Super nice.
Yes. And I would say this wraps up this minute pretty well. We have minute 78 coming up, where we will talk a bit more of the aftermath of his Mahasamadhi. And yeah, I want to thank you guys for being in a minute, everyone for listening. Jai Guru.
Jai Guru.
Jai Guru.